Okay, so I'm wearing the developer's hat today and want to share with you sort of the Sunbridge story. You're going to hear from a lot of people today about a lot of the details. I'm not a landscape architect. You're going to hear a lot of minutia about how to execute on this whole alternative landscape approach. But for those of you who don't know where Sunbridge is, it's located in partially in Orange County and partially in Osceola County in eastern and southeast region of Metro Orlando. Tavistock Development Company is the developer of Lake Nona, and we're also the developer of Sunbridge. And a little bit about Sunbridge. It is predominantly in its natural state. It's former ranch land, so there are pasture lands that are associated with this, but it's part of the ranch lands at East Orange County and Osceola County. Magnificent forests, oak forests, lakes, wetlands, waterways. Our whole mission is to inspire access to real nature. We are placemakers. If you've been to Lake Nona, you know we're placemakers, and we're taking the sort of God-given natural character of this place and trying to build a place around it without destroying it, without disturbing it. The native landscapes are what differentiate Sunbridge from Lake Nona. I'm going to get into that a little bit. And then we assessed that there really was a market. We projected that there was a market and hoped that there would be for nature-connected living and attracting the eco-conscious buyer. So our business case, sorry, Pierce, I told you 30, it is actually 36,000 homes on 27,000 acres. It's a large land holding. It's probably 50, 60, 70 years worth of potential build out. But we knew from the get-go that water supplies just aren't sufficient to address the needs of this particular project. Water supplies aren't sufficient in Florida to address the growth demands of Florida. And so we had to come up with an approach that made some sense to us. The cost of alternative water supplies for this project were astronomical. And so we turned to conservation as the only viable choice as a developer to make sure that we had a long runway for the development of this project, and we had to assure that we could reduce demand so that we had a development program. So necessity is the mother of invention. Our business case was that if we did not do conservation, we did not conserve water, we would not be in business. I mean, land development, it's maybe an ugly word in this room, but it is a for-profit business. And we wouldn't be in the business if we couldn't make a profit. And in this instance, our conservation goals and our business goals align. And that's a very unique situation. It doesn't always happen in Florida. If it did, we'd have far better land development practices. We'd have far better eco-based communities. But it doesn't happen a lot. In this instance, it does. And our ability to be a success is clearly linked to our water management. So you're going to hear a lot about the native landscape pilot. I'm not going to talk about that. The Sunbridge Stewardship District conducted a lot of research, applied research with our partners at IFAS, UF, UCF to come to the conclusion that these alternative landscapes were really our only answer to keep a viable business going. We had private sector partners and life soils. The guys are in the room. Where are my life soil friends? Without your compost, this doesn't work. And you'll hear more about that today. And then here is the challenge. The idea of alternative landscapes and idea of water conservation and all the ecosystem services that it provides is great. And you heard from Pierce, the academic, and all of our researchers at IFAS were telling us this is the way to go. And so it's a great concept. But they stop at the research, they publish their findings, and conclude that, yes, it can work. But as a developer, we got to make it work on the ground. And so our landscape architecture partners generate the design guidelines. That's great. We have a great set of design standards that are constantly being changed. But do the landscape architects that actually draw the plans for these homes really get it? They really don't. So there's a lot of training there. And then you've got builders who we sell developed lots to. And the national builders aren't used to this kind of approach. And so left to their own devices, they're going to do what they're comfortable with, which is the sort of traditional approach. So there's a lot of training of the builders. We have to train the sales people for builders that have to tell people that these alternative landscapes are the right way to go. And not every buyer wants this kind of landscape. Then you sell the home, and you have a homeowner who inherits this and is used to just, like everybody, we were all raised here, you flip the switch on the controller and you just forget about it. Well, that's not what you need to do here. You really need to understand what's going on in terms of the plant material, the compost, and irrigation patterns. So we being the stewardship district, entered into an agreement with Cherrylake and Toho Water Authority, our utility provider, who has been a great partner, by the way, and it's in the best interest of the utility to save water as well. They want a longer runway so they can provide water for their customers over the long term. And so everybody was aligned, and we entered into this agreement, a 3-year agreement, where we were actually going to have people in the neighborhood being involved. And Tim, to your credit, Cherrylake has been a wonderful partner here, putting together. You're going to see lots of data about what's going on in Sunbridge and how it's being managed. But we have people now who are available to homeowners on a one-on-one basis. They're in the community. They're knocking on doors. They're teaching people how to manage these landscapes. None of this would be a success if we didn't make all of these assumptions about, just put the design guidelines out there. It'll work itself. It's not how it happens. You got to manage this right down to the individual lot and the individual homeowner, and that has been one of the biggest lessons we've learned. We've also learned that we need to, beyond just training for the individual lot and educating, that we needed to do more about educating the community at large about water and sustainability and living in Sunbridge. So we created the Florida Headwaters Foundation. It's focused on educating and inspiring the next generation. On our stewardship initiatives, we're conducting more applied research, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. We've hired a naturalist educator that's in the community every day, offering education and training to the community. We realize this is not a one-time tell somebody what to do and leave. It's got to be a constant reminder and a constant messaging that you live in a special place. And we call this the Headwaters Foundation because this is the headwaters of the St. Johns and the Kissimmee River is Sunbridge. It's extremely important to the state that what we do at the headwaters affects everybody downstream, and that's what this focus of our foundation is. And we're constantly conducting new initiatives. Now, here's what's next. You're hearing a lot about water conservation. You're going to hear a lot about that today. And all the benefits of that, the ecosystem services and other things that come along with these alternative landscapes. But the second side of this coin is water quality. If we are doing these alternative landscapes and we are not putting these fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides on these landscapes, we think, and our hypothesis is, that there should be some water quality benefit to that, right? So stormwater treatment systems are designed to remove nitrogen and phosphorus out of the treatment, out of the system. And so when water outfalls off the site, goes into the ground, it's at a higher quality. Well, what if we're not putting nitrogen and phosphorus in the system from the get-go? Florida's just adopted new extensive stormwater treatment rules for a good reason, that there's the feeling that the stormwater systems aren't doing enough to take these nutrients out of the system. And so we are about to embark on a next level of research with our partners, the Stewardship District, the Nature Conservancy. Where's Leslie? Leslie, great partner. I want to amplify what Tim said. The Headwaters Foundation, we are going to be modeling our 2 different stormwater treatment systems, one in Del Webb that Pierce showed you, the conventional landscape, one in Westland Park with the alternative landscape. We're going to be monitoring stormwater quality, groundwater quality. We're going to be comparing the results, and our hypothesis is that the alternative landscapes are going to significantly improve stormwater quality. If that happens, that's a huge finding for the state about water quality. We know what we can do in terms of water quantity. Our next step is to prove that we can improve significantly water quality. So I'll leave you with this. You're going to hear a lot about the details of this. I wanted to give you the developer's perspective. We had to do something different here, and we have a great partnership. The Collab has been an amazing entity, and the fact that this group probably has tripled since the first meeting, quadrupled maybe, shows that it's becoming more and more important. I speak a lot around the state. There are local governments that are starting to adopt these alternative landscape standards. I think it's going to be the new paradigm. It's coming, and I think the fact that all of you are here is proof that it's coming. So thank you.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the ground game at Sunbridge to give you guys some insight into what it takes to execute this at scale with the builders and the residents. So to help me with that, I'm inviting Greg Noonan and Greg Witherspoon to join me. Greg Witherspoon is a community planner and landscape architect with Kimley Horn, who authored the Sunbridge Residential Landscape Standards. And Greg Noonan is Cherrylake's enhancement manager and leader of our builder and resident services at Sunbridge. So Greg, good morning.
Good morning.
Just wanted to have a chat to share what we're learning and how we've experienced this out there. So starting with you, Greg Noonan, tell us a little bit about the interactions with the builders and how that journey has been for them over the past couple of years.
So, when we first started talking to the builders and we explained to them, kind of how this whole process were going to go, they made a point to tell me how much they appreciated that there was going to be an additional inspection that they had to do to get their properties done. They loved those Initially, look, they were a little grumpy initially, which makes sense, right? Because from their perspective, prior to us coming on board, I think they felt like, look, this is another box to check. What's this all about? But the tone that we took from the very beginning was that, this isn't about getting in trouble. This isn't about us, trying to show that people are doing this incorrectly. We want you to succeed. This is a collaborative effort between a bunch of different stakeholders, between the developer, between the builders, between the residents, between everybody. And so we took a tone of being there to help. And by and large, at this point, I think the builders understand that that is what we're there to do. And they've really come around. I don't know that we're quite to excitement, but they're asking questions. I kind of measure my successes in the moments where they go, oh, okay. And just about every week, a guy will come up to me and go, what's going on? Hey, what's up with this? Why isn't this okay? I go, yeah, we just need to switch that one species out for another species. Oh, okay, we can do that. And we've seen dramatic improvement in the quality of these landscapes. And so when you drive around that neighborhood and see what they're doing at this point, I think it's a real success story.
Yeah, you can see the evolution of the neighborhood, at the first sections that when we first rolled out this approach, it was a struggle for everybody to learn how to comply with the standards and implement them. But as you say, now the builders are knocking out the homes and the landscapes are looking better and better. A big part of that is the residential landscape standards. And Greg, you recently went through a revision to release a new edition. What were some of the things that you guys addressed in the new revision?
Well, before that, I without you guys on the ground, conversing with the builders, collaborating with the builders, this would be a monumental task. And so we can be in our office and draft these plans all we want, but as Richard said, in order to implement this, it takes everybody involved. And so hats off to you guys. Change is hard. So what changed from revision 1, the first thing is that we expanded beyond our thinking in terms of what this encompassed, right? So Chris and I started with 12 homes. We're now talking about 36,000 homes. So we updated the boundary, if you will, of what the guidelines encompass, which means that we expanded beyond just one jurisdiction into 2 other jurisdictions. And that was really important because we wanted to manage to the most stringent requirements, and that happens to be the Toho Water Authority. You heard Pierce mention the 28 inches. Well, now that 28 inches, or whatever comes in the future for changes at Toho Water Authority, will be required across all the jurisdictions that Sunbridge encompasses. And that's a huge difference.
Yeah, and we tightened up a few things that we found after the first year would help us achieve our goals of reducing water. And one of those things was the turf. So how did we address turf in the new standards?
So managing turf is essentially managing your water use as well, right? I mean, we're able to use drip systems and hoses and things like that to really help establish the ground covers and some of the other shrubs and trees and things like that, the native material that we know uses less water. Turf is the big issue. It is the big water hog, if you will. And so with this next revision, we're able to do some significant things. I would say the first significant application is that we removed the ability to plant turf in between the sidewalk and the curb. So all of the parkways in the future development are going to be some type of ground cover, preferably native and Florida friendly, which is required, but it won't be turf. On top of that, we removed St. Augustine entirely from the plant palette. So any turf that is allowed to occur will be managed in some specific zones, if you will, around the house, and that will be Bahia turf, preferably unirrigated, but there will not be any more big St. Augustine lawns and no St. Augustine in the parkway, which is huge.
Yeah, that is huge. Ed, so how did that go over with the builders?
Again, it's a collaborative. It's a collaborative.
They loved it. No, believe it or not, one of the big conversations that I'd have in the first, in neighborhood C, where we've been working the majority of the time, they'd ask me, look, if we're doing this no turf thing, why are we putting St. Augustine in these verges? Why don't we just do the peanut there? Everybody loves this peanut. Let's do the peanut. So I think everybody got it. And they see the value of a low irrigation, more attractive. It's one of the things that immediately pops when you drive through the neighborhood is those alternative ground covers and native species versus the St. Augustine. So that part I think they really appreciate. The turf's a struggle, but it's also part of this paradigm of how these landscapes look differently. One of the things that people bring up to me all the time is one of the things I think Dick's Height and you guys worked on together is that space between the two models that's just the pine trees and the muley grass. Yeah. That's the most unconventional looking landscape probably in that whole neighborhood, and it's almost always the point of reference. People are like, I love that. Well, there's no turf in there. Mm-hmm. So I think people are starting to adopt it, and the builders, again, as we've been able to work with them to help them refine their plant palette, refine their processes, the quality of the landscapes that they're putting in, I don't think the turf's that big a struggle. If anything, the smaller amount of turf is forcing them to be more creative from a design perspective, and they're using that turf really thoughtfully, creating these kind of nice little pathways that accentuate the architecture of the house. It's really, really cool. It's a whole lot cooler than a big yard.
Yeah. And one thing that was interesting, Cherrylake is doing the installation of new landscapes for one of the builders out there, and so when the new standards came out, they asked us to update our pricing to accommodate the new standards. So we had to take a look at what does it cost to put in the perennial peanut versus putting in the St. Augustine. Yeah. And so we went through the exercise very carefully, and it turns out it doesn't cost more, because we were having to estimate a whole pallet of sod, because we don't know if we're going to get more than one home at a time. So you're going to bring in a pallet of sod, and you're only going to use half of it. So you have this waste factor when you estimate. So when we realized, oh, we were already kind of had a high price on that turf because of that, it was a wash to go in with the perennial peanut, which we're planting quartz, 12 inches on center. And so no cost impact, it turns out. So that was cool.
Very cool.
Of course, in the original standards, you had already limited the percentage of turf to 15 to 25%, depending on the size of the lot. So that was the first thing. And now we've also addressed where the turf can go from the standpoint of the different zones that were created around the garden. So maybe share a little bit what these zones are.
So the zones are really important, and you'll see some of that. You'll see some graphics here in a little bit with another project that's employing this idea. The idea is that different areas of the houses need to be treated differently, right? So you have the very public front-facing area that we talked about. Well, we wanted to create a more cohesive neighborhood, naturalistic feel, and so that area in particular is where we started and said, no turf in this area. There's another point when you look at the details of some of these houses that there's a little bit of a challenge between, okay, well, I have a really large side yard, but it's public area, I want to put turf there. Well, we created some cool opportunities where we can allow the turf to occur as long as we've got some screening so that that turf is still not in the public front view, if you will. And then in the backyard, that's where we allow the majority of the turf. So you can have a nice, circular play area. You can have these paths, as Greg mentioned, but that's where the focus is, where we're really allowing the turf in the non-public facing areas.
Great. What are some of the other things that you want to highlight on the new revisions?
There's a couple things. The first one is how we calculate 75% native plant material. So I know I've worked on some regulations and we've had some discussions with some other municipalities and jurisdictions. How do you come up with that number, right? And so what we've decided at Sunbridge is that we have said that it's 75% of the quote-unquote stems, if you will, not including ground covers. And so that really gets us to the point where we're focused on shrubs, trees, and other stem installed material. And that becomes a calculation that somebody like Greg can actually calculate fairly simply without having too much complication. And I think that's really a big one that I'd like to hear more here in a little bit about how those calculations are going and how those inspections are going. That was a big deal. Focusing on the plant palette and being specific for Wesleyan Park was a really big deal. So we've got a different plant palette for the front-facing and side-facing public view areas. Then in the backyard, we've allowed residents to do anything that is within the IFAS Florida-friendly defined plant list. So we've separated out those two plant lists. With your guys' help, we continue to refine what that plant list is for the front yards. So that was another one. The language throughout the document, it was a bit of a learning curve. As a landscape architect, we've got some ideas and some nomenclature that we use on a regular basis. And once a homeowner says, well, what is this? You probably need to focus on that. So we did an overhaul throughout the entire document to make it more homeowner friendly. And I think that's really important that we should mention too, Tim, is that this is a document that is upfront in deal making with Tavistock and their builders, which is really a big deal, but it is also a document that manages the homeowners after they take ownership of their landscape. And so it was important that it worked on both of those levels. So that's a few other important things. I may be missing something, but I think learning from that first experience really helped us create a better, tighter document for revision 1. And you guys mentioned the whole kind of chain of authority process, and I think that was a big addition as well.
Yeah, excellent. The standards are superb, and it's going to allow the next neighborhoods to be even better than the first. Greg, how is the native requirement going? Are the builders and their landscapers finding the native plants? Are they understanding how to get to this 75% native requirement?
Yeah, believe it or not, that was probably our biggest hurdle was, hey, 3 to 1. You go 1, 2, 3, 1. And it really did ultimately take us walking through the landscapes with some of the builders and explaining this is exactly how that works. And then they got it. I don't know how familiar, I don't know how much experience most of these guys have ever had with a plant requirement like that. So again, you have to have some empathy about the learning curve and everything. But at this point, they don't seem to have any issue with it. And one of the things that gets talked about in native plant conversations a lot is availability. That never comes up. I never hear, we can't find any of this stuff. So that, I think, is also a nice little bellwether for where we're getting in terms of adoption of the plant palette. They're succeeding by and large.
So which particular species of native plants do you find are working really well out there?
Yeah, well, I think the plant palette is pretty killer. I really do think we found a pretty bioregionally appropriate, diverse plant palette that works. Because you can see what's really cool is, you'd assume with a limited plant palette that you'd see like an incredible amount of homogenization through the neighborhood, that everything would look really samey, but it's what's cool is you can distinctly tell the difference between the companies that are doing the work, not only in, quality, but in terms of plant palette. Everybody's doing it a little bit differently, and it really gives the neighborhood a lot of character, but it's still a cohesive plant palette, so it still works. But, it's the usual suspects. Saw palmetto's killer, Kunti's killer. And what I think we've really found is the standout is the perennial wildflowers. The biggest pushback that I would get from homeowners was, well, there's no color. There's no color. And you and I have talked before, like, well, where's the color in VO and St. Augustine, right? That's all green. And when we started to really adopt putting a ton of these native flowers in, it was, what's that? What's that? That's Lanceleaf coreopsis. That's, Gaillardia pachella. Oh, well, I like that. I bet you do.
I want what my neighbor has.
That's right, yeah. And so there's a knock-on effect where like things become viral. The sunshine mimosa, like I like whatever that little pink thing is. You get that all the time. And so people don't have the language necessarily yet, but they can point to stuff. And when they can point to stuff, it's actually, if you look what happens on a given street, if we do an enhancement or if we do a house and we put a ton of those wildflowers, it's not long before somebody down the street calls me and goes, I like that.
Yeah, so it spreads. These native flowers are taking over. So let's talk a little bit about the resident experience. You've been interacting with the residents. We should say that a part of the contract we have with the Sunbridge Stewardship District and the Toho Water Authority is to provide free consultations to residents. So they can go on the website, schedule a consultation, and Greg pops out of the bottle and and gives them a consultation. I think you've done like 100.
100 something, yeah.
What's some of the feedback that you're getting?
What's with all this plant straw? No, I'm just kidding. It's interesting. There's a gamut, right? Like we had already talked about. Some people are more excited about it than other people. I'd say on average, we are at a place where virtually everybody understands the goals that we're trying to achieve. Pretty much everybody believes that saving water is a good idea, that it's important that we protect the environment. I've never had a consultation, even the ones where people weren't particularly excited, where they went, I don't care about the earth. I've never gotten that. They go, no, we get it, but we want our house to look nice. The homeowner experience too here is, because it's a different sort of neighborhood, people are trying to wrap their head kind of around the way that this works. But again, as the neighborhood has started to mature, as the trees are coming in, as even the shrub materials are starting to fill in, it really is the thing that people have said for years, is like, if you can point to it, if you can look at it, it's pretty easy to get people to understand it. And I think we're really rounding a curve where it's not so hard to sell, because you can point to the older parts of the neighborhood and go, that's what we're doing. Like if you don't like it, you don't like it. But I think in those 100 interactions that I've had, 75% of them are enthusiastic, and that last 25% is like indifferent. So we're not getting people that are vehemently opposed to this, which I think is what a lot of people would assume.
Are people asking, where's my yard? Where's my lawn? Like, I need more turf grass?
So the big obstacle that we get is people want to have a little 18-inch strip of turf grass right in the front of the property, because that's where you play soccer, that's where you play baseball, is in those 18 inches of grass at the front of the property. I remember as a kid, that's where I spent all my time, was in those. Yeah. It's a personal gripe, we eliminated that in Neighborhood D. We
As a
got rid of
designer,
it.
that drives me nuts.
Oh my
It's
God.
a complete waste of resources.
It's a pain to take care of. It's a bummer, but it's familiarity. It's
Yeah.
people are opposed to change, right? And so one of the big things there is as we've gotten the adoption of those alternative ground covers to fill in that as opposed to turf, it's dynamite. Because why would you focus on your turf there when you can use that in the sidewalk, which is a recreational space? I think it was one of the best things you guys did in that update was, look, this area is where you spend all your time. Design that for where you're spending your time. That front is about curb appeal. And curb appeal in the context of the plant palette of this neighborhood is deploying these native plants correctly, getting that front park, that front street park kind of feel going. And I think it works when you embrace it.
Okay, so what are you doing tomorrow morning?
We are going to be at Sunbridge for their spring fling, hopefully continuing to evangelize people and get people excited about kind of the whole thing that's going on here, answering their questions, getting them more and more familiar with this. Base Camp is a great example of a lot of these flowers that are blooming. So I think when people spend time around it and it looks really, really pretty, they get it, they get excited about it, they want to participate.
Yeah, so a lot of communication, a lot of engagement with the community helps to get their enthusiasm. We need them to care so that they can take care of these landscapes. And so tomorrow we hope to see, I think they're expecting 1,000 people. It's not just the residents, but future residents will be coming by. And that's another opportunity to share and to explain about these landscapes. One of the things we did to help the communication is we created a website. And Greg, maybe you can share. I'm going to put a little screen capture up here. So this is the website.
Yeah, so our marketing team, who's also responsible for this event and deserves all of the flowers, pun fully intended, they have also put together this incredible web resource, which is a variety of different things that residents have access to. But principally, it's the way that they can contact people to get help understanding this landscape. So what you're seeing here is the process of people walking through booking a confirmation or booking a consultation with our team. We also are selling pine straw to the community. There was a big pushback on we can't find pine straw. So we've made that as easy as possible so people can, eliminating those barriers to people adopting what we're doing out there. We have a wealth of information that people have access to fully understand not only the kind of nuts and bolts of taking care of everything, but also the whys, also the design principles. And so that website is sort of the nexus of all of our services out there, and frankly, probably the only way that what we're doing is possible because of how much more efficient this makes the whole process.
Yeah, so this, you're going to get a calendar notification that somebody just scheduled a consultation with you?
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
Everybody here.
We need to stop
Everybody,
running. We need to stop running the tape. 'Cause and then coming next month, we are going to be launching the plant market. Well, actually, this is the water dashboard. So tell us about the water dashboard.
The water dashboard is super cool. So that's a huge collaboration between Toho Authority, between Tavistock, between ourselves. Pierce Jones has worked extensively on that. And what it is a sort of a gamification of this water conservation thing. So we want these people to be excited about conserving water, which is not traditionally a very exciting thing to do. But what is exciting is finding out that your street is the lowest water using street in the neighborhood. And we've seen actually that people are posting on Facebook and stuff. They're like, Ranger Ave, we're the winners, like we're the lowest. And so it's kind of working. But what you're looking at essentially is the water usage for your street ranked. We've got a kind of a little badge system that we're deploying where people start out as novices and slowly work their way up to guides where they're really, really reducing their water. So just a cool way to kind of visualize the data of this at a neighborhood scale, another way that we're communicating that big vision to people.
And encouraging peer pressure.
Encouraging peer pressure, relentless shame.
Yeah.
And showing them how it impacts their wallet.
Yeah.
Because the water guides are paying $17 a month, and the novices are paying $141 a month for their water. That's a pretty good incentive. Great. And then tell us about the plant market.
So the last piece of this is, obviously, you can hire a landscaper to come to your house and do work for you, but a lot of folks want to kind of DIY. And when it comes to planting these flowers, it's a really, really easy thing for a family to do together. So again, eliminating barriers to adoption. we're actually rolling out a plant market where you'll be able to buy plants from Cherrylake and they will arrive at your door, and you can make your yard as beautiful as you care to. Really, really cool. I think we have almost every single plant that's on the list will be available, if not every single one.
Great. So you can buy the plants, you can get the pine straw. Can you get a bag of compost?
You can get a bag of compost. I think we're even talking about doing stuff like garden beds maybe, and like really trying to get people to embrace the whole naturehood, the whole sustainable vision.
Yeah. So making it easy, providing the resources, the support, the ground game, and it doesn't happen immediately. It starts by having the vision, starts there, then you get the commitment from the developer, then we put in place the standards, and then it's a long journey of education and training and coaching.
Buying from the builders.
Buying from the builders, and that's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think about this a lot. We've got, great adoption. We're getting really good traction with the homeowners. We've got really good traction with the builders. We've improved quality. We're rolling out these, digital resources. We've got a lot of enthusiasm all around. And this is the worst it'll ever be. It'll only get better, and we're already this far. So I think when you think about that, it's, really remarkable to imagine what's going to happen in 5-10 years in this neighborhood.
Great. Well, thank you guys very much for sharing a little bit about the realities on the ground.
Yeah.
Greg,
definitely. Thanks.
Greg,
Thank you.
awesome. So I want to share a little bit more on the data that we've collected at Sunbridge and how this potentially can scale across the state. And throughout the day, I'm going to be referring back to some of this data as we hear from our other speakers. We wanted to really compare what is the input use on a conventional landscaped home versus an alternatively landscaped home. And as Pierce started to share with you on the water, we were able to do that by looking at the homes across the street, which were built in the conventional way, predominantly St. Augustine, lots of exotic plants, using 62 inches of water. Is this slide loaded? It's not switching for me. Okay, so again, the big four goals that we really want to measure are irrigation use, mineralized fertilizer use, pesticide use, and then on the positive side, the ecosystem services. We believe that these outcomes can be measured, and we want to measure our success according to these objective, measurable outcomes. So it's not so much about the process, it's really in the end, did we achieve the goals? So we did a comparison of the homes, conventional landscapes. So for the water, we were able to get meter reading from the homes across the street and compare it to the homes in Westland Park. So this is the typical conventional landscape home. Uses 60 inches of water a year, which comes out to 367 gallons per day. We did takeoffs of hundreds of landscape plans to get an average landscape typical plan. And we therefore know exactly in this typical unit what's the square footage of St. Augustine, the square footage of Bahia, the square footage of trees and shrubs. We were able to build a model. And then to get the fertilizer use, well, we went to UF-IFAS. They've published a lot of documents, EDIS documents, on the recommended fertilizer use for nitrogen, that's N, potassium, phosphorus, P, and then potassium, K. And so if you were to follow the Florida-friendly recommendations for Florida landscaping, you would use 8.62 pounds of nitrogen a year on a typical home, half a pound of phosphorus, and 7 pounds of potassium every year. And that's if you follow the guidelines. But as Pierce said, if you go to Home Depot and it's a 10-10-10, you're probably putting a lot more phosphorus than these recommendations. But we just give everybody the benefit of the doubt and assume everybody's doing it exactly as IFAS says they should. So there you go. That's 16 pounds of NPK between the three. And then we looked at EDIS documents as well for understanding what the recommended rates of insecticides, fungicides, and herbicides are for these landscapes. And I've got this broken down into the whole list of chemicals, which is kind of an interesting list if you enjoy reading chemicals. It's really long, but it rolls up to 6.5 ounces a year of insecticide, 9.9 ounces a year of fungicide, and 27 ounces a year of herbicide. So 44 ounces a year of pesticide, just to take care of a typical Florida home. So what are we finding here at Wesleyan Park on these alternative landscapes? So we talked about the water. That's 15 inches, which comes out to 92 gallons a day. And fertilizers, well, it's 0, because for all the landscapes that you saw yesterday have been managed with 0 fertilizer inputs for the past 3 years. And all of the residential homes that we're managing at Wesleyan Park, we're not putting any fertilizer out there. Now, we are putting compost, and we're providing nutrition to the plants through organic nutrients that come in through the compost. And we're also working with biological enhancements like Wriggle Brew, which is a worm tea you'll hear about later this afternoon. And so 0. That's 0. And then insecticides, 0. We have not used a single insecticide either at Cherrylake or in the Wesleyan Park homes. Not a one in the past 2 years at Wesleyan. Sometimes we get a little bug show up, but we just kind of just do nothing. Maybe some other bug will come and eat it. The problem kind of goes away on its own. But the diversity of plants that we have in there and the native plants, they don't have any problems like that. Fungicide, 0. We still have to use some herbicides, and that is maybe something we can continue to work on reducing. But we measured the herbicides that we use by 1,000 square feet, applied it to the homes, and that's the comparison. So this is our unit-to-unit comparison. There's the reduction, 75% reduction in water, 100% reduction in fertilizers, mineralized fertilizers, I should be clear, and 100% reduction is in insecticides and fungicides, 54% reduction in herbicides. So there you have it. So what does that mean? If you had these results over the entire Wesleyan Park community, which will be at build out 1,000 homes, that's 100 million gallons a year saved. 100 million gallons a year, every year. 16,000 pounds of mineralized fertilizers avoided every year. 31,000 ounces of pesticides every year. What about 30,000 homes at Sunbridge? What would happen there? That's almost 3 billion gallons of water every year. 469,000 pounds of fertilizers and 919,000 ounces of pesticides avoided every year. What does that mean? I'm not sure. These numbers are confusing. So I did a little comparison. So it turns out that the Central Florida Water Initiative is having to build alternative water source projects, and St. John's and South Florida Water Management Districts have funded 36 alternative water source projects. It's cost them like $88 million to generate. No, it was more than that. I'm getting my numbers wrong. It turned out to be $4.5 million per million gallons a day. $4.5 million of capital cost to generate 1 million gallons a day of alternative water source. So this essentially would offset $36 million of capital cost for the utilities if they were having to build alternative water source projects. It's 4,443 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water. It's 110 bathtubs full of pesticides. And it's the equivalent of 1,676 farm acres of nitrogen. So it takes about 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre to grow most Florida crops. So that's what we're avoiding. So we'll come back to this a little bit later on.